Joining us. We'll just give it a couple of more minutes for more people to join us. Welcome everybody who's joining us. You can use the chat option on the bottom of your screen to let us know your name and where you're joining us from. Hi, Nikhil. It's great to have you here. Hello, Lavanya. Hello, Vikram. Hi, Sarah. All right, great. I think we're off to a great start. So welcome again, everybody, and thank you all for joining us today. We at Worldview are excited to have you all here for season 2 of the Gen Z Solvers Interactive, and as we call it, GSI. So GSI is a digital learning experience for Generation Z across the world. And on this platform, together, we will be working towards real world problem solving around topics like urban sustainability, environmental conservation, health, global citizenship, and technology. Work also emphasizes a lot on the importance of 21st century skills, including entrepreneurial skills, and most importantly, the adaptive capacity of an individual, as we call it. And so, as part of GSI, we've started an entrepreneurial series called Launching Change 101, where we bring to you some of the most successful social entrepreneurs from across the world to share their journey and experience with you. And today we have with us Jessica Jackley. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. And
with you.
Brace yourselves, everybody. I have a long list of Jessica's achievements and experience coming your way. So Jessica is a social entrepreneur. Her work over the last decade has focused on financial inclusion, the sharing economy, and social justice. She is best known as the co-founder of Kiva, the world's first crowdfunding site for micro enterprises and low-income entrepreneurs. She is an author of a book called Clay Water Brick, Finding Inspiration from Entrepreneurs Who Do the Most with the Least. She is also an adjunct professor at Marshall School of Business at University of Southern California, where she teaches social entrepreneurship. She holds an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a 2011 World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. And no, it doesn't end there. Jessica's honors include the Economist's No Boundaries Innovation Award, Fast Company's Most Influential Women in Tech, Silicon Valley Forum's Visionary Award, finalist for the Time 100 Most Influential People, and the list just goes on. So welcome again, Jessica. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for the kind intro. I'm of course joking around. Also, I have to close my door because my children are going to come down. Give me like 10 seconds. I'm so sorry.
Surely, that's no problem at all.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Real life. Back. Right? that was pretty much 10 seconds by the clock.
Okay, good.
Yeah. All right. So of course we're here to speak about, entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship more specifically. But before that, to get into what entrepreneurship really is, there is a stereotypical definition that most people associate with entrepreneurship, that is starting your own business or starting your own initiative. But, we at Worldview have always discussed how entrepreneurship is also more of a mindset. It's an approach towards how you sort of go about things in life. So what, according to you, is entrepreneurship really?
So great question. Great place to start. Thank you for that. I never, if I just back up for a minute, I was never that interested in business or entrepreneurship growing up. In fact, I was very skeptical of it because I thought businesses were run, I thought the point of business was to sort of trick people into buying something they didn't need. And then the business person got to take their money and kind of hoard it and be selfish with it. I didn't like the idea of that. I thought the way to solve problems in the world, that's the goal, make sure everybody is as well and as healthy and as happy as possible. So I thought the way to do that is by more generosity, more giving, and business is the opposite of that. So I was a skeptic. Of course, as I had experience after experience, especially with microfinance loan recipients and with interacting with amazing people who ended up becoming social entrepreneurs, as I did myself, I learned that business and entrepreneurial thinking can all be tools and ways of thinking, ways of operating in the world, ways of organizing people and resources that can be channeled for good or for bad or for anything in between. And so I think when I think about what the definition and the real heart of entrepreneurship is for me, and I like to borrow from Howard Stevenson's definition. He used to be a Harvard Business School professor. He says entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. Now, let's break that down again. It sounds very boring and dry, but it's not. It's very exciting. So the pursuit, okay, it's about pursuing something, going after something, deciding that you're going to go get it, right? The pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. So I think it's interesting that there's so much time and many words spent on this last half of the definition. It's about the pursuit, not possession, not what you might have at the moment, right? It's not about position in the world. It's not about your background or your education or how fancy you are or who you know or any of that stuff. It's not about prestige. It's not about power. It's not even about the past, what you've been up until this moment in time. It is about deciding where you want to go, taking steps toward that goal in a methodical and smart way, right? And doing so even when there are obstacles or even when you feel like you don't have enough to move forward. So to me, that's, and I'm taking liberty, I'm taking, I'm expanding the definition perhaps a little bit more than what he actually said, than the quote that I gave you there. But to me, entrepreneurship is about what you do, not what you have, not where you stand, not all sorts of things. And I think that's incredibly important because it's a definition that feels relevant beyond just day-to-day work. It feels relevant to how you move about the world, how you think about what's possible, how you think about what you can get done and what you can become. It's very possibility centric. It's very optimistic. It's very life-giving and redemptive, I think. So entrepreneurship for me is not just a thing that you go do in work. It's about it's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of seeing solutions to problems and trying to figure out how to get those problems solved, how to bring people and, when you need them, resources around the efforts so that you can all move together in a direction to solve those problems quickly and efficiently and for all. So it's a pretty, there are a lot of other definitions that might say entrepreneurship is a more narrow thing, but I believe it's about how you look at life, how you look at what you want to get done in the world, and then not believing all of the no's, right? All of the shoulds. There, I will say this too. I know we have, we're going to talk about a lot, but this is kind of the most important thing. So I think every day in our lives, there's always a list of things that we can tell ourselves or that the world can tell us are issues, are problems, are things that should hold us back. Like, you're too young. But here's the funny thing. As soon as you get over people saying you're too young, they'll say you're too old, or you don't have enough experience. You have the wrong experience. You have too much experience. You can't see things with fresh eyes. You have not enough education. You have too much education. You can't think in an innovative way. It's just ridiculous. So there's always going to be a list of things. So it's good to learn early, I think, to be aware, sure, of who you are and what you know and what you don't know. That's always a good thing. But it doesn't mean that you have to apologize for yourself all the time or not get started. Start, ask and answer questions. When you can't find answers yourself, go ask other people, go bring in other people that maybe are more experienced than you are in certain areas, and move towards that opportunity that you see.
Truly, truly so, Jessica. I completely agree. And this is, this is something that we also really focus on, entrepreneurship, not just as a business, but as a mindset. So, and what that ends up doing is that it helps you no matter what you choose to do in life, because it's like you said, it's a way of looking at life. It's a way of approaching life. And, we at Worldview work with Generation Z. So we work with a lot of young people, and an entrepreneurial mindset, like you were saying, it always helps developing that at an early age. So this is something that we also really focus on. So what do you think are the benefits of inculcating like a mindset of this sort at a very young age?
I think two, yeah, maybe more than two here, but we'll start with two. Two things jump to mind. So one, obviously having an entrepreneurial mindset, it's similar to, I think, a growth mindset where, like my kids aren't allowed to say I can't. They can say I can't yet, right? Or I don't know this, I don't understand this yet. I'm working on this. I'm going to put in the time and the energy and the work and get better at something. It's not, I guess I'm not good at this. I think they sound like simple switches in one's perspective and in one's mindset, but that switch can make a huge difference, because then you don't see barriers outright. You see challenges, maybe minor setbacks, but you figure out ways over, around, or through. So that's one piece. I think the second piece is, looking at the world as a place that doesn't actually have that many rules. You can decide that something shouldn't be a certain way and go change it. I think it's a very different thing to look at the world that way versus feeling afraid, feeling like you need to fit into a certain paradigm, or a certain, not paradigm, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but a certain set of, restrictions and the way things ought to be. I think if you just are good at thinking creatively, are good at thinking, asking really hard questions, asking and wondering why something is the way it is, and maybe why or how it can be different, I think that's a beautiful way to live. And the truth is, like, I believe that's reality. I don't think it's just this crazy radical notion that's fun to try on for size. I think it's truth. Like, as younger people, I'm on the older side now, but just barely. But I remember, growing up, it's easy to be just handed like a script, or handed a set of operating instructions for the world at large. Like, this is the way things are. This is the way you get things done. This is the way to be effective. Every day is new and nobody's lived it before. Every day things are changing. Every day there might be new things changing that open up new possibilities. What do I mean by that? So I'll move to my third point. So one, growth mindset, entrepreneurship mindset, it's a good way to think. Two, like, entrepreneurship, I think, helps teach you that you can make your own rules for things, and that's good. And three, I believe when you get good and trust yourself enough to observe the world and kind of make the calls and say, I think it's this way. I know most people are saying this, and this is the way things have always been, but I feel like it could be this way, and I'm going to go make it so. It builds a lot of self-confidence and trust in your own vantage point. And that's really important for real disruptive stuff to happen. So I mentioned the word paradigm earlier. I studied philosophy in my undergraduate education. And I remember, I can't reach it from where I'm sitting. It's in the other room. But I just recently dug up, Anyway, I recently dug up one of my favorite texts. It's Thomas Kuhn, Kuhn, and it sounds dry and boring, but I promise it's not. It's called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, okay? This guy talks about and kind of coins these words, paradigms and anomalies. And a paradigm is the way that most people see the world. A paradigm is sort of the way that we, it's like our framework. It's our kind of default perspective. And I'm talking big picture stuff, like way back in the day, the predominant paradigm was that the earth was flat, right? Way, way, way back. Now, there were people, Galileo and others, there were people that started to say, actually, maybe that's not true. I've noticed this thing, like I've observed the planets and the stars moving and the sun. I think maybe I have this other fact that threatens the status quo. It's an anomaly, right? So this anomaly doesn't really fit in this paradigm. If this is true, a lot of stuff here might not be. So for things to ever change, scientific revolutions, right? Somebody has to be brave enough, bold enough to say, actually, I noticed something, and I don't know what it means yet. I don't know how it fits, but I think this is true. These new true insights are happening all the time, every day. Now, they may not necessarily mean that they shift the entire, population's understanding that the earth is not flat, but it's round, right? But things like this that push our thinking forward, the first people to observe it, it's scary to say, this is necessarily going to sound crazy, but I just noticed something. It's scary to be the voice that makes those insights, that points those things out. But it's crucial to our ability as a civilization to grow. So I think not all entrepreneurship is disruptive, but there's something about trusting yourself, listening to feedback, having a team, all those things are great as well. But there's something about believing enough in your own perspective, in your own mind, in your own ability to say, I feel like even though yesterday, maybe this wasn't the case, today, something's shifted. I see it, and it might have big ramifications for how we do whatever in the world. I think building that trust in oneself is a really beautiful and important thing. And again, I hope for my kids to be able, I want that for them so badly. I want them to be able to be the naysayers when necessary, or to be the one voice speaking out against something that maybe people haven't questioned and should start questioning. I think it's a beautiful thing. Anyway, as you can tell, I can talk. I can give long answers. So I'm going to cut myself off, and we can go to wherever you'd like to go next.
No, that's great, Jessica. And no, I think that's a really important takeaway. That curiosity and inquisitiveness is a very big factor of always questioning why, and trying to build your own perspective, especially in this age of technology where you're being fed with information left, right, and center. It's very important to sort of maintain that identity and maintain your own unique perspective on things. Completely agree. Just a quick note for our audience, I missed mentioning this in the beginning, but you have a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Please, if you have any questions for Jessica, you can let us know in the Q&A option, and we'll be addressing them in the last 15 minutes of the session. So coming back to you, Jessica. One aspect, that this entire series, Launching Change 101, is about is the social aspect, the social entrepreneurship aspect. And you're a social entrepreneur who's really, really worked on creating that sort of positive social impact. But at a young age, when, especially for Generation Z, our audience, we've noticed that there is certainly a desire, there is this want to create impact, but then there is also this aspect of wanting to build a successful career. So, how do you balance that aspect out? How does social entrepreneurship get balanced with wanting to do well for yourself while creating a positive impact?
Yep. Great question. So, something that I actually have steered clear of and sort of tried to get away from in the last few years is it's helpful for some people to think about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship as different things. But I believe that the world is moving very quickly to a place where it's just going to be entrepreneurship. And if you're not thinking about your own impact and about your organization's impact, you are missing something. You have a huge blind spot. So I think, if every person, every organization, every project has a social impact. I mean, there's this myth of neutrality, like, oh, we don't, everybody has an impact. You're moving about the world in a way that creates an impact, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. So you better be aware of it. You better start owning it, and ideally be proactive enough to make it a really positive one. I talk to big corporations sometimes about their social impact, and it's not necessarily language that they like or want to use for a lot of different reasons. And so what I try to encourage them to do is think as broadly as they can about risk and about opportunity. So if you can think, if risk, has been pretty narrowly defined, I think, in business over, traditionally speaking. But there are risks, as we are all experiencing right now. I mean, it's almost orange out my window. The skies are terribly polluted right now. There's fires just ravaging California. There are environmental risks. There are risks to our planet that we all contribute to, right? If you're not thinking about those, if you're not aware and trying to be on the right side of history, right, or in relation to some of these big picture risks, I mean, if you don't know if you're not tracking and sort of thinking about how you're connected to each of the global goals, like you're missing something. You're ignoring reality. So I think businesses that just plan on plowing ahead without consideration for how the world is changing and how they can be a part of that change in a positive way, I think they're just being dumb. And I believe that the businesses that are on top of that and thinking about that and trying to show up in a way that is helpful, not harmful, I think those are the businesses that are going to win, plain and simple. The other side of risk, of course, is opportunity. So, social entrepreneurs and perhaps nonprofits and NGOs traditionally have been focused on serving populations, serving segments that cannot necessarily be the payers, right? Be the purchasers of the service or product that they need. So quick, primer in nonprofits versus for-profits. Again, I'm doing air quotes, very traditionally speaking. For-profits, the buyer and the recipient are the same. You need shoes, you have money, you go buy your shoes, you wear the shoes. You're the same person with the money and receiving the product, right? There's a market force there. There's a loop. It's very easy to get feedback. It's very clear. Nonprofits have the extra challenge, of course, or organizations that want to serve somebody that may not be able to pay for the thing themselves have a double, and I think really more intellectually interesting challenge. Maybe this person needs shoes, but they don't have any money. This person has money, but they're cool. They don't need shoes. So they donate. The organization makes the shoes, gives them to the person. What's a little tricky here is that this feedback loop is one of information. And it's about reporting on the experience of this person who may or may not have an incentive to speak up and certainly can't vote with their dollars directly. So it's a broken loop, right? I say all that because I think more and more there are businesses that start out by, for example, providing a free product or service to start to reach out to and better the lives of people that maybe aren't or don't need to pay full cost for the thing. There are so many creative models out there in business and social enterprise. There are hybrid models. I was looking at a model of an organization the other day that had a nonprofit, a for-profit, and had a foundation. And the foundation itself was very creative. It was a donor advised fund. I mean, it was this crazy kind of Frankenstein-y structure, but it got the things done it needed to get done. So my advice, if I just wrap this up and make it advice, those are some of my thoughts, but my advice would be, as you think about things you want to fix in the world, they're usually the solutions are not just coming from a single place or a single perspective. We're being able to work pretty seamlessly between the for-profit world and the nonprofit world, thinking as an entrepreneur in a traditional way, however you've been taught, but also being very aware of your social impact. That's going to benefit you. Thinking about, being a social entrepreneur, but yet thinking about sustainability, which, by the way, is nonprofit speak for profitability, right? They're the same concepts. It's just different language, different ways of talking about it. Don't box yourself in. Don't assume that you need to have a nonprofit status, an NGO status to help people. Don't assume that you have to have a for-profit status to have a sustainable livelihood for yourself and your employees and your team. You can use whatever structure you need. It's a tax code. It's not a religion. It's not a way of, yes, there are rules and boundaries. There are opportunities and responsibilities with each, but figure out exactly what you want to get done first, and then find the best tools, the best structures, the best capital, the best people, and be open to being very creative and being sort of agnostic about which sector you live in. Be nimble, be flexible to go do the stuff you want to do.
Absolutely, Jessica. And I think, breaking those stereotypes it becomes extremely crucial in this day and age. when, like I said, there is a desire to create impact, but there are also these defined aspects of what entrepreneurship is, how you can, uh, how profitability is different from sustainability, and so on and so forth. So I think one of the big challenges, like you said, there are so many issues, right? We are exposed to so many issues globally, locally. So how do you figure what the right problem to solve for you is? Like, you decided to, start an organization around microfinance. So of course, would like for you to also let us know about what microfinance exactly is for the benefit of our audience, but also how did you home on to this? How did you figure that this is what you want to do?
So my for whatever it's worth, my experiences, the things I've worked on, it's been always very deeply personal. Like it might be a weakness, but I'm not great at working on things passionately, deeply for a long period of time if I'm not a believer. I'm not really into it. So I know some people, it's a luxury, right, to get to do that. Of course, I've had jobs that are kind of a drag just to pay the rent. It's fine. But my most beloved projects and the things that have worked the best have been things that I have been really, truly, authentically motivated by. Now, your question is like, how do you decide? Only you can decide how to decide. But for me, I have often been initially motivated by an emotional spike, whether it's positive or negative. So sometimes you learn about a problem in the world and you get so mad and so offended that like people are suffering from this thing. Like, if you're angry about something, pay attention to that. It could lead you to, it could give you that extra fuel that you might need to really go deep, work extra hard to find out more about a solution to that problem and to pour yourself into that. If you're very motivated and inspired by something, it doesn't have to be negative. If you're very motivated and like blown away by a particular solution or theory of change or strategy in the world, pay attention to that too. If there are people in your life that you've worked with, whether it's individuals or groups, that just speak to your soul and you think, it almost doesn't matter what I do to serve them, but I need to work with kids. I need to work with women who have gone through this thing. I need to work with people who've also had this same disease or whatever. That's a way to go. Maybe it's geography. Maybe you're like, I had a phenomenal childhood. I love my hometown. I'm going to go back to my hometown and do something there that's useful. There's, when you look at the whole world of possibilities, there really isn't a wrong way to start to narrow that world. Now, when it gets into a specific solution or focus area, in a strange way, even though I encourage narrowing in pretty quickly, once you're narrowed a little bit, just get close. It doesn't have to be perfect. So let's talk about microfinance for a second. I've talked to a lot of people who want to be involved in microfinance, and they have they're like, I want to work for this organization in this community doing this particular job so that I can be in the world of microfinance. And I think that's great. But if you can't get that, just get close, be in the world that you want to be in the, if you can get to the organization you want to be in, don't worry too much about even what the specific job is. Just get there, get to know the people, get to know the org, get to know the work, and make yourself as useful as you possibly can be. So microfinance is basically banking services and products, right? Financial services and products, often tailored to the needs, they're micro, of people living on just a few dollars a day. So micro loans or microcredit are very small loans, sometimes even just a few dollars. Micro insurance is another thing that is tailored to the very unique needs of maybe subsistence farmers or people that are just selling small goods at a local kiosk or like in a trading center or on the side of the road. Micro savings accounts exist for people that might only have a few dollars in the bank. And the way that banking is done, these banks for the poor, although I just don't like using the word poor. Anyway, I'm eliminating that from my language. Nobody likes to be called poor. Nobody likes that word. People who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and who are trapped in poverty have different, need different tools, right? And so microfinance exists for that. For me, Kiva began out of a total, I was intrigued. I was totally fascinated by microfinance. I wanted to work with Dr. Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. And I tried to do that and it didn't work. So I did what I could do. I worked for an organization not even really doing microloans. They did micro grants, and they were in Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. And I was like, good enough, close enough. So way back 15 plus years ago, I did an unpaid internship with a nonprofit called Village Enterprise in East Africa. And I learned about these micro grants. Again, it was like $100 going into the hands of people that weren't even on the first rung of the ladder, of the economic ladder. They were just barely surviving, but receiving $100 allowed them to buy a few more goats and do what they were doing already, but at a slightly higher level. I learned the basics from that experience, but what I also learned, and what was invaluable, and it changed the course of my own life, was that I had this excuse for a few months during that internship to spend day after day after day with what I discovered were the people that I wanted to serve. I wanted to spend my waking hours figuring out how to be helpful to entrepreneurial, micro enterprise, owners, fishermen, goat herders, seamstresses, farmers, the kiosk owners. I wanted to be useful to people for whom $100 could be a trajectory shifting experience. And while the micro grants that I saw being distributed were really interesting and helpful, I found that the biggest surprise for me wasn't necessarily how much good the money could do. That was great, but I kind of that was not necessarily totally unexpected given what I had learned up until that point. What really blew me away was that I felt like I had been tricked by the stories I had heard of a lot of the people that I was interacting with. I had been told by well-intentioned NGOs and organizations that also wanted to help over the years, I'd been told a story that was very one-sided about the lives of these entrepreneurs. I was told, as a white, privileged, middle-class American girl growing up and woman, I was told a one-sided story about sadness, suffering, desperation, hopelessness, just like how life was 100% terrible for people living in faraway, very underprivileged communities, and how the only way for things to get better was for me to swoop in and help and give my money. That's not reality. I mean, yes, there's need. Yes, I should be generous and give because I have so much. Of course, all those things. And yes, the work of the organizations is often very great, the ones that had told me these stories. But what frustrated me was that they forgot to mention how much triumph existed, how many positive things were happening in the lives of people who were bootstrapping it and working harder than anyone else, even in the organizations, to lift themselves out of poverty. All they needed oftentimes was an opportunity, was access to capital. And even though it was nice for me to be generous, I sensed with these stories that, a lot of people didn't even want that grant. They didn't want a gift. They wanted a loan. And so thank goodness I was very naive about business because I had no idea how hard it would be. But I and my co-founder, Matt, at the time, again, 16 years ago, thought, well, why don't we provide loan funding for these new friends that I met in Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania? And so we started to lend $25, $50, $100 of our money and our friends' money, way before people were saying or using the language of crowdfunding. And we enabled it a little bit by putting some stories of those entrepreneurs online. But basically, it was a very, very simple experiment and a very personal passion project where we wanted to lend a little bit of money to people that I had met who wanted a loan, not just a grant, to grow their business activities. That's how Kiva began. It was very simple. And what we did was pay attention to the details, pay attention to how that worked, what could be improved, and round after round of loans to these a handful of people, then 15 people, then 30 people, then a bunch more. Round after round over years, right? We got better and better. And Kiva grew into a robust, wonderful organization that facilitates millions and millions of dollars. It's closing in on $1.5 billion in loans from not just me and my family and my friends and their friends, but from a whole world of people now that want to be the providers of opportunity to hardworking entrepreneurs around the world. So that's just Kiva. That's one piece of it, piece of the story.
That's great, Jessica. It's great to know how this all started for you. And from what I understand, this unpaid internship that you were talking about is a great source of inspiration for you also writing your book, which is
Yes,
called Clay Water Brick: Finding Inspiration from Those Who Do the Most with the Least.
that's right. I
So
finally found it on my husband's bookshelves. It's up high, should be front and center.
so Jessica, what is this book about, and what are the lessons we can draw from those who do the most with the least?
Great question. So a lot of the business books that I've read, if you looked at my office, you would see more business books on the wall as opposed to my husband's books, which are great. But the business books that were always introduced to me and that I encountered in business school, they were often by, let's just be totally honest, they were about or were written by white men who often had a lot of opportunity already before they even began. I wanted to show that there's wisdom and knowledge and a ton of intelligence and truth to be found in the lives of everyday entrepreneurs, like what the average micro entrepreneur knows and does. Like the same, I remember learning about these pretty sophisticated principles in my business school training, and then seeing them executed by the simplest, like a rickshaw driver, right? Or somebody selling charcoal, or a chicken farmer, or like the truths, the principles of business that work. They work whether you have a gigantic company, a $1 billion company, or a $200 company. They are still true, and the real core pieces of knowledge are just so generally applicable. I wanted to write about that. So the book is my story, the kind of chronology of my own journey, discovering that I could be an entrepreneur and work and live entrepreneurially in the world, and that I could build things and keep building things throughout my life that could contribute to the betterment of lots of people. That's that's what I try to do. But in between each chapter of my own journey chronologically is the story, like a case study of an entrepreneur that I've met along the way that taught me something really crucial. So whether it was, there's a banana farmer that was very sure about who she was, and she taught me about the importance of knowing your mission, knowing who you are and knowing who you're not, and saying yes or no to opportunities based on that decision that you make, based on defining what you're going to do and who you're going to be, and then sticking to it. I remember meeting a shopkeeper who had built her shop like right smack in the middle of this footpath, not on the side of the road, not with the other shops in the trading center, but she's like, I'm going to do this here. Boom. And it was amazing because the people that walked to and from their work in the mornings would like literally have to go around her. She placed herself in a position, quite literally, where she would have to and get to see her customers, talk to them every single day. So she wanted to be as close to her customers as she could and to really be a part of their day-to-day lives. So she knew them well and would design everything in her shop to be there for a customer. Just one more. There was a woman who I met who, this was like one of the most profound lessons, but she couldn't read or write and yet ran a business based on this own system that she had sort of invented with teacups. It was like a teacup abacus where she would overturn teacups and slide them back and forth on the shelf. And she had a system where she would count how much she needed, how much she had used. And it was unbelievable. But she knew, despite the lack of education that she had, she knew how to keep track of things enough so that the business ended up having more in and less out, right? So that's all you really need to know. Take in more than make more than you spend, right? And she did it, and she made it work. It just, I can't get enough of, and those kinds of stories. Those are the kinds of entrepreneurs on Kiva and that I've worked with in other situations. And quite frankly, like, I think the Zuckerbergs of the world, like, okay, yeah, they build great things. No offense to him. I'd rather learn about the people that actually have made a lot happen, even though they've had very little. So those are the sorts of things you can learn from entrepreneurs who do the most with the very least. If, I think story after story in that book, hopefully when people read it, they think, oh my gosh, if that person can do that, I can do my dream. I can go do and build the thing I want to build.
That is definitely the biggest takeaway, Jessica, of course, like finding inspiration from the people who do the most with the least. Obviously, one makes you realize how much you have. Second makes you realize how much you can do with what you have.
Yes.
So absolutely, that's entirely true. And while we've spoken a lot about these, positive, inspirational stories, I'm sure there's another side to the entrepreneurial aspect, which are the challenges you face as an entrepreneur. So if you could throw some light on, what are the challenges you faced in this entire journey of yours?
Yes, and I'm getting up. I can't sit this long. Oh. All right. I think I've already touched a little bit in the very, very beginning about the basic challenges of the internal challenges, right? The invisible challenges, where you need to really just decide to be confident, decide you're going to try, decide that even though nobody's ever perfect, nobody ever has every possible way of being prepared, you're going to figure it out. So I think clicking that switch, just making that choice to begin, is the biggest one, and the most difficult. There are other real challenges. So, often people assume that getting funding, getting capital is the first and the biggest challenge. Excuse me. I'm still waking up on this side of the world. You don't always need funding to do the things you want to do. I have story after story of times when not only entrepreneurs that I've met have figured it out, but even with Kiva's journey, for example, we didn't have any funding at the beginning. We didn't have any money. And my co-founder, Matt, and I remember we gave our friend who was really good at drawing and was a graphic designer. We gave him a guitar. It was our old guitar that we weren't using. That was our payment. We bartered. That was our payment for the first Kiva logo that was used until I think last year. It lasted a good 12, 13 years. We couldn't pay developers, so we just would order a bunch of pizzas and have kind of a party, a hang session, and ask them to hack away and build different features that we needed. I mean, yes, those things cost money to then give, but what I'm trying to get at is, if you have something that you believe in, that you're excited about, whether it's equity, whether it's a title, whether it's just an experience or autonomy to work independently, whatever it is, there are lots of other things. There are lots of other incentives you can provide to people to help you out when you need it, especially if you're doing something that serves the greater good. So you don't need to assume that money is going to be the biggest barrier. I mean, we can get into the mechanics of funding and raising money. That's obviously a lot of what I've built. The things that I've worked on have provided that for people. So it's not that I believe it's unimportant. I believe that it's not the most important thing. What's most important is figuring out what comes next as an entrepreneur. Whether you have a co-founder or a team or not, I do think that's one of the hardest things, deciding each day, how to navigate an ever-changing landscape to keep moving towards your goals. You have to have a lot of clarity of mind and a lot of, I think, boldness to make those decisions and then act, right? Knowing your assumptions, knowing the things you're trying to prove along the way, knowing the bets that you're making, and knowing what is a little bit more certain, having all that sort of clear in your mind, I think can allow you to be able to say yes and no and move quickly every single day when you have a team of people saying, now what? Now what do we do? I think also, if I have, and I'll say one more challenge, then we can talk about whatever else. I think entrepreneurship can feel very lonely at times. So whether it is a co-founder or a close-knit founding team, or it's just good friends or family, it can be crazy making, especially if you're doing something new and innovative. One day you can feel like you have the secrets to the universe, and the next day you can feel like you're completely mad, right? And then again, you're like, no, I'm really onto something. This is great. It's going to work. It's going to be fantastic. And then the next day something goes wrong and you can tell yourself, oh my gosh, I should give up. This is terrible. It's really hard to stay steady and to feel, I think emotionally that's not talked about enough. It's difficult to chart your own course. One of my dear friends who passed away a few years ago, would say that entrepreneurship to her is like make believe. Like you need a really strong imagination muscle. You need to be able to like envision the world that you want to see, and then go make the thing that's in your head real. That's kind of a crazy thing to do. It's kind of a crazy journey. So having a really good emotional support system and paying attention to your balance in life, doing the things that center you, that ground you, and that allow you to feel clear-minded, clear-headed, those things are actually really, really important, I think. It's not just, I think sometimes, again, I'm not bashing men. I love men. I love people. But I do think there's a very testosterone-y male way that entrepreneurship has been glorified, especially in Silicon Valley and places like that, where you have this picture of entrepreneurs like pulling all-nighters all the time, not not leaving their desks or their garage or whatever, and just cranking through, blasting through the problems, getting it done. Stopping, stepping back, reflecting, moving quickly, but like being smart about it and being balanced, I think is underappreciated. So that's my personal advice.
Thank you, Jessica. All of your insights and learning so much from your experience has definitely been insightful for me, and I hope it has been for our audience. We actually have a couple of very interesting questions for you that I would like to move on to now. So one of the questions that we've received is, what can be a basic skill set for people who aspire to be an entrepreneur at a young age? This is from Samiksha Modi. She says, what all can they start doing at an early age that could help them pursue this?
So great question. Because I had a liberal arts education, and I was very interested in poetry and philosophy and politics and not business. For me, going to get my MBA later, or doing like a basic set of classes around a business education, like that's not a bad idea, so that you can at least have the tools at your fingertips and know the sort of questions you might want to ask and answer along the way, so that you know how to structure a basic business plan and to make basic models to project and guess at. It's guessing what might happen in the future. That's helpful. It's good to have those tools in your back pocket. But truthfully, the thing that I think helps the most is just doing something. Now, you don't want to just do anything for the sake of doing it, but if you can choose something small, right? Everything starts small, or it should, I think. Start creating something that is of value to other people. And whether you give it away, whether you sell it, whether you, like I was talking about the nonprofit broken sort of loop before, whether you find somebody else that believes in that value of that thing and funds you to go do it and give it out to the world, whatever you decide to do, once you start actually doing it, you'll learn more in those first few days of doing than you would in years of reading and planning and thinking and wondering. All that stuff is important too. Don't stop creating space for quiet time and reflection, so that you can process a lot of the learning that you'll be doing during the day. I mean, for me, I don't know what I think unless I've been talking about it or unless I write it down. That's just me. But I think like do a small project and you'll very, very quickly start to exercise those muscles that over time you'll grow and be ready to start something that maybe doesn't stay small or medium, but that grows really, really, really into it, something huge. So just start doing stuff.
That's so true, Jessica. I think it's exactly like, physically, when you want to get better at something, it's about, really exercising that muscle literally. And I think it's pretty much the same when it comes to developing certain skill sets. You keep getting better and better as and when you keep on exploring with your idea. So that is absolutely great advice. We have one more very interesting question from Sam. He says, do you think that COVID-19 and the new normal will affect the way budding social entrepreneurs will think here on? And in your opinion, how can, Generation Z, and at Worldview, we call them the generation of solvers, turn this around and into an opportunity in the coming years?
100%, absolutely. And I think, I hope that this is just a wake-up call for all of us. We are, I don't know, it feels in the US like we are just seeing, unfortunately, all of the ramifications of of this person that we elected. I mean, I know we probably shouldn't get into politics, but like my husband and I are spending so much time and energy making sure that that doesn't repeat itself. Anyway, for solvers and fixers, I think we are seeing what is essential. We are seeing what really matters. And some of the stuff that really matters, like the air that we breathe, we have done too much to abuse the earth. And I believe that will be deeply, it will deeply affect kids growing up right now that have to slap a mask on my kids to go outside, not just because of COVID, but now because of the air. I feel sad and it's heartbreaking. And I also think it will galvanize a new generation of thinkers and doers to say, these aren't negotiable. Like, operating in a world in a sustainable way is not a nice to have. It's not an option to do anything else. So I know that will change. I'm sad that it took this, but I believe that it will lead to good things. The other piece of we're talking about like what's essential. Is it essential that I get in a car and drive to an office where I may or may not actually spend a lot of time with other people live, but do phone calls and video calls? Yeah, like we're seeing that we can do a lot with less movement, with less expenditure of resources and energy and fuel. I think that's a really, really good thing. I think it's for sure going to change the nature of work. It's already changing it. And I think with those new it's changing very quickly. So don't blink, right? Everybody, hopefully you're paying a lot of attention. I'm trying to keep up with this. It's going to take, we talked about paradigms earlier as well. There are things that are happening, who knows, this week that might suddenly tip the scales and alter the way, something is done in the world that you might notice first and that you might suggest, or you might put the pieces together and say, well, wait, if this is true now, and if people are comfortable with this and now we can do this new thing. So I would say absolutely yes, pay attention to those changes and let yourself be emotionally affected by the pain of the world, the challenges of the world, as all of this unfolds before our eyes. Like don't harden your heart towards it. Let yourself be affected and use that as power to dedicate your every hour that you have when you're working during the day to doing something to be helpful.
Truly, Jessica, I think we're all aware of all the uncertain times that we're exposed to currently, but necessity is definitely the mother of invention. So yeah, we'll definitely see a generation of, like we call it, solvers stemming out of this entire situation we're globally as a unit going through. So I think on that note, I would just like to ask you what your message to Generation Z would be, all our audience watching us, and we have this session on YouTube as well. What would your message be to the Gen Z of the world?
Honestly, I would say my message is probably something like, stop listening to me. Go learn and listen to the people that you want to serve, and listen to yourself. You're going to come up with ideas that other generations before you have not had, couldn't have had. Be bold and trust yourself when you make new insights that could lead to, big changes in the way this world operates, because clearly we don't have it all. We don't have it all figured out.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I personally really, really enjoyed having this conversation with you. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. We hope you really are taking back a lot and are going to, really, really think about this entrepreneurial potential, which Jessica and really believes that, each one of us has. It's not really a definition of starting a business or starting an initiative. It's unlocking those skills that you already possess and working on them. So I really hope you all are all taking back a lot from this session. Thank you again, Jessica, for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.